My sister-in-law spilled champagne across my dress at my husband's birthday dinner and immediately gasped, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought you were standing somewhere else." Everyone waited for me to make a scene, especially my husband, who had spent the evening defending her every little mistake. I simply wiped my hands, picked up my phone, and sent one message. A few seconds later, the restaurant manager hurried over and whispered something into her ear. Her smile disappeared. Then she looked at me and asked, "You already knew?" I hadn't said a word about what I'd discovered that afternoon. Everyone at that table expected me to fall apart. They wanted me to. My name is Elowen Hartley. For 6 years I've been married to Cassian Vale, a commercial property attorney people trust the moment he shakes their hand, calm voice, perfect manners, the kind of man who remembers everyone's birthday except how much he's hurt his own wife. That night was his birthday. 14 guests, colleagues, friends, family, and sitting close beside him, the person I trusted least in the world, his younger sister, Seraphine. For most of dinner, she talked around me instead of to me. Elowen's been working so much lately. She's gotten so private. Sometimes I wonder if she trusts any of us. Small comments, harmless on their own. Together, they built a story about me distant, suspicious, difficult, and every time I opened my mouth to correct it, Cassian got there first. She's just joking. Don't take it personally. You know Seraphine. I stopped arguing months ago, not because I gave up, because I started paying attention instead. And that afternoon, I had learned something neither of them knew I had. Dessert came around 9. Cassian was mid-story, laughing, completely unaware that his wife was sitting across from him holding a secret that could end everything he'd built. That's when Seraphine reached for her glass. I saw her eyes flick toward me first. Then the champagne tipped and cold liquid soaked straight through the front of my dress. The table went silent. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I thought you were standing somewhere else." Every face turned to me, waiting, watching to see if I'd finally break. Cassian turned to her. "Are you okay?" Not me, her. Something in my chest went perfectly still. I wiped my hands with my napkin and said, "I'm fine. Elowen, I'm fine." Seraphine's smile faltered just slightly, because this wasn't the reaction she'd planned for. She wanted tears. She wanted a scene. Instead, I reached for my phone. There was already a message waiting, sent 20 minutes earlier by a woman I'd only spoken to once, Nadia Pierce, the restaurant's general manager. "If anything happens tonight, don't confront anyone. Just send me the word, now." I looked at Seraphine, then at my husband. Then I typed one word and set the phone face down. Now. Seconds later, Nadia walked into the dining room and went straight to Seraphine's chair. She bent down and whispered something in her ear. I watched my sister-in-law's face change. Her smile disappeared. Her eyes went wide, and slowly she turned and looked at me, not at Cassian, at me like she already knew I was the one who'd sent it. Nadia straightened up and asked one quiet question. "You already knew?" I didn't answer her, because I hadn't told her everything, and I hadn't told anyone, especially not my husband, what I found that afternoon. If you've ever sat across a table from someone who was smiling at you while planning something behind your back, you already know this feeling isn't something you forget. It stays with you. And if you're someone who understands what it means to stay calm while everyone around you is waiting for you to break, stay with me for this one. Because Elowen hadn't even shown her hand yet. 3 weeks before that dinner, I was still telling myself our problems were ordinary. Every marriage argues. Every family has someone difficult. Every successful man makes financial decisions his wife doesn't fully see. That's what I told myself, right up until I found the money. $12,000 gone from our joint account. When I asked Cassian about it, he barely looked up from his phone. She needed help. "You transferred $12,000 without telling me." "I was going to." "When?" He sighed. That sigh had become its own language, the sound he made whenever he wanted me to feel unreasonable without ever having to say it out loud. "That's just Seraphine," he said. "She makes mistakes. You don't have to turn every mistake into a character judgment. She didn't make a mistake. She transferred $12,000. She needed help. And you didn't think I deserved to know?" He didn't answer that one. He never did. The money came back eventually. But something about it stayed lodged in me, the way a splinter does even after you think it's out. Over the following months, Seraphine kept finding new reasons to need my husband. A business dispute, an apartment, a former partner causing trouble. Every problem became his responsibility. And every time I questioned it, I was the one who looked petty. So I stopped questioning it out loud. I work in financial compliance. I spend my days finding the transaction that doesn't fit, the record that doesn't line up, the relationship that looks harmless until you check the dates. So when I noticed the pattern forming around a company called Northbridge Advisory, I couldn't just look away from it. Seraphine said Northbridge hired her for marketing work, but the company barely existed. A virtual office for an address, a manager who had once worked a case with Cashin, and payments from Northbridge that kept landing in accounts tied to her name. Then I found the Halston property deal, one of Cashin's own cases. The buyer's company had paid Northbridge. 2 days later, Seraphine moved money into a private investment account. None of the numbers were huge on their own. Together, they were a pattern I couldn't unsee. I didn't accuse anyone. I started quietly gathering what I was legally entitled to: household records, public filings, just documenting. Then, 3 weeks before the birthday dinner, a message arrived from someone I'd never heard from before. No greeting. Just one line. "You should look at the contract your husband signed for the Halston property." I opened the attachment and read it 3 times. Buried in the language was a clause that made my stomach drop. Seraphine didn't just receive payments. She held a financial interest in the deal itself. If Cashin knew that and hadn't disclosed it, this wasn't a family problem anymore. It was the kind of thing that ends careers. I wanted to confront him that same hour. Instead, I thought about every time he'd made me feel like I was imagining things, and I decided to wait until I couldn't be dismissed that easily. Then I found something worse. A signature that looked like Seraphine's, on a document dated a day she'd sworn she was out of state. I still couldn't prove it, and I wasn't going to accuse anyone I couldn't prove wrong. Then, the afternoon of the dinner, one more message came, this time from Nadia Pierce, general manager at the Bellwether, asking to speak with me before the party started. Her voice was nervous on the phone. Someone, she said, had contacted the restaurant days earlier asking specific questions about the private room and the seating. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your name came up." "By who?" "I'd rather tell you in person." I got there 20 minutes early. Nadia told me the reservation had been changed twice. Seraphine had asked to sit beside Cassian, which wasn't strange on its own. But she'd also specifically asked that my seat be placed across the table, out of easy reach. Then Nadia showed me one more thing. A message Seraphine had sent the restaurant, asking whether the private dining room had security cameras. I stared at that message for a long time. I almost left. Instead, I decided to stay and watch whatever she thought she was about to get away with. I just didn't know yet that I wasn't the only one at that table carrying a secret that night. I didn't tell Nadia everything that afternoon because I hadn't finished putting it together myself. It started around 2 o'clock, 4 hours before the party. I was at my desk at home, supposed to be finishing a compliance report for a client. Instead, I was staring at the Halston file again, the one with Seraphine's name buried in a clause she probably thought no one would ever read carefully enough to notice. That's when my phone buzzed with an email from an address I didn't recognize. No name attached, no greeting. Ask her about the Fenwick account before you ask anyone else. I sat there for a long moment before I even opened my laptop. Fenwick wasn't a name I'd seen before. Not in the Halston paperwork. Not in anything Seraphine had ever mentioned. I searched it against every document I'd already collected, and it took almost 20 minutes before I found it, a single reference, tucked into a footnote of a consulting agreement between Northbridge and a firm called Fenwick Partners. Fenwick Partners was registered 2 years ago. Its listed director was Cassian, not Seraphine, my husband. I read that line so many times the words stopped looking like words. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Attorneys set up holding entities for clients all the time. It didn't have to mean what it looked like it meant. Except Fenwick Partners had received a payment from the same account that funded Seraphine's private investment transfer. The same week. Almost the same day. My hands were shaking by the time I called Nadia back. I didn't tell her about Fenwick. I wasn't ready to say his name out loud to a stranger. Not yet. Not until I understood what I was looking at. But I did ask her one question before I hung up. "Has anyone from my husband's office contacted the restaurant this week?" There was a pause on the line, longer than it should have been. "Actually," she said slowly, "yes. Someone called yesterday asking about the private room's occupancy limit and whether guests could be added to the reservation without notice." I asked who called. She told me it hadn't been Seraphine. I sat with that answer for a long time before I could make myself ask the next question. "If it wasn't Seraphine," I said, "then who?" Nadia hesitated again, that particular kind of hesitation people use when they already know the answer will change how you look at someone. The call came from a number registered to a business account, Fenwick Partners. I closed my eyes. Somewhere in the last hour, I had gone from suspecting my sister-in-law of manipulating my husband to wondering if my husband had built the entire arrangement himself and let her take the blame for it whenever anyone got close. That would explain everything. The sighing, the dismissiveness, the way he always defended her before I'd even finished a sentence, not because he was blind to what she did, but because every time I questioned her, I was one step closer to questioning him. I thought about the birthday dinner he'd insisted on. 14 guests, a private room, Seraphine seated beside him. I had assumed she'd orchestrated the whole evening to embarrass me. Now I wasn't sure the guest list was hers to plan at all. I called Cashin's office, telling myself I only wanted to confirm a work detail, nothing more. His assistant answered instead of him. "He's actually not here," she said. "He left early, said he had something to take care of before tonight." Did he say what? No, just that it was personal. He seemed a little stressed, honestly. I thanked her and hung up before my voice could give anything away. Stressed wasn't a word I associated with Cassian. He didn't get stressed over birthday parties. He got stressed over cases that could end badly for people who trusted him. I looked at the clock. 4 hours until the dinner. 4 hours to decide what kind of wife I was going to be when I sat down across from a man who might have spent 2 years quietly building something on top of a lie, and a sister-in-law who might have simply been following his instructions the entire time. I didn't call Cassian. I called Nadia back instead, and asked her one more thing, whether the restaurant's private room had security cameras. She said yes. That was when I told her about the word I might need to send her later that night, and asked her to be ready for it. Nadia was still standing beside Seraphine's chair when I realized the entire table had gone quiet enough to hear silverware settle against porcelain. "You already knew?" Nadia had asked her. Seraphine hadn't answered. She was staring at me instead, and for the first time in 6 years, I watched her face without a script written on it. No sad eyes, no trembling lip, just fear, plain and unguarded. Cassian looked between us, confused in a way that almost seemed genuine. "What's going on?" he asked. "Nadia, is there a problem?" Nadia glanced at me before she answered, like she was waiting for permission. I gave her a small nod. "There's a matter concerning tonight's reservation that needs to be discussed privately," Nadia said carefully. "It would be best if we stepped into my office." "Now?" Cassian said. "It's my birthday." "It won't take long." Seraphine's hand tightened around her napkin. "This is ridiculous. I don't know what she's talking about." She said she, not looking at Nadia. Looking at me. I kept my voice even. "Then it should be easy to clear up." Something flickered across her face, not confusion, calculation. She was trying to figure out how much I actually knew, and I could see her deciding in real time whether to keep pretending or start preparing an explanation. Cassian stood first. "Fine. Let's sort this out so we can get back to dinner." I stood too. My dress was still damp against my side, cold now, but I barely felt it anymore. As we followed Nadia toward the private hallway, Cassian leaned close to me and said quietly, "Whatever this is, please don't make a scene in front of my colleagues. Not are you okay, not what happened. Just don't embarrass him." I looked at him and said nothing, because I finally understood something that had taken me 6 years to see clearly. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about what I might already know. If you've ever watched someone's whole personality change the second they realize you're no longer fooled, you know that moment doesn't just feel satisfying, it feels like waking up. If stories like this one speak to something you've lived through, stay close, because Elowen is only just getting started, and what waits behind that office door is going to change everything she thought she understood about her marriage. Nadia's office was small, a desk, 2 chairs, a wall of monitors showing quiet black and white footage of the dining room we'd just left. She closed the door behind the 3 of us and didn't sit down. "I want to be transparent about why I asked you here," she said, looking mostly at me. 2 days ago, I received a call from someone identifying themselves as being with Fenwick Partners, asking detailed questions about tonight's reservation. Seating arrangements, camera coverage, guest additions. Cassian's expression shifted, just barely. A tightening around his eyes that he smoothed over almost immediately. "I don't know what that has to do with my sister," he said. "It doesn't," Nadia said. "It has to do with you." The room went very still. Seraphine's eyes darted to her brother, and for the first time all night she looked like she was the one waiting for an explanation instead of giving one. "Cashin," I said quietly, "what is Fenwick Partners?" He didn't answer right away. That pause told me more than anything he could have said. "It's a holding entity," he said finally, "for a client matter. You're the listed director." His head turned toward me sharply. "How would you know that?" I didn't answer him either. Not yet. Nadia clicked something on her keyboard and one of the monitors switched to a call log. "The number that contacted us traces back to a business line registered under that entity, not to Ms. Vale." Seraphine's mouth opened slightly. "Wait, that wasn't me?" She sounded almost relieved, which told me something I hadn't expected she genuinely hadn't known. Cassian's jaw tightened. "This is a misunderstanding. I can explain everything once we're home." "You can explain it now," I said. For the first time in 6 years, my husband looked at me the way strangers look at people they've underestimated, like he was recalculating everything he thought he knew about who I was and running out of time to do it. Cassian didn't answer me right away, and in that silence, I understood something I hadn't let myself accept until that moment. He was choosing his next words the way he chose them in a courtroom, carefully, strategically, like a man protecting a case, not a marriage. "Fenwick Partners was set up for a client," he said again. "It's not unusual. Attorneys create holding entities all the time." "For which client?" "Eloin, this isn't the place." "You just made it the place," I said. "You told Nadia to watch the room for guest additions. You asked about camera coverage. That's not something a lawyer does for a birthday dinner." Seraphine was watching him now with an expression I'd never seen on her before. Not smugness, not performance. She looked like someone realizing in real time that she might not be the villain of this story after all, just a person who'd been useful to one. "Cashin," she said slowly, "did you use my accounts?" He didn't look at her. That was answer enough. "You told me Northbridge was legitimate," she said, her voice rising. "You told me the consulting fees were normal. You told me not to worry about the paperwork because you'd already handled it." "I did handle it. You handled it so that if anyone came looking, it would look like it was me." The room went very quiet. Nadia stood near the door, clearly wishing she were anywhere else, but she didn't leave. I think she understood, the same way I did, that whatever happened next needed a witness. I turned to Cassian. "The Halston contract, the clause naming Seraphine's financial interest. Did you write that?" He hesitated a beat too long. "I drafted the agreement, yes." "With her name on it. Not yours. It was structured that way for tax reasons." "That's not what I asked." His silence confirmed what I'd already suspected walking into that office. My husband hadn't been protecting his sister for 6 years out of loyalty. He'd been protecting himself and letting her absorb the risk every time someone got close enough to ask questions. Seraphine sat down slowly in the chair beside Nadia's desk, like her legs had simply stopped agreeing to hold her up. "You let me think I was helping you," she said quietly. "You told me family looks out for family. I moved money because you asked me to. I signed things because you told me they were routine." "They were routine? Then why is my name on all of it and yours on none of it?" Cassian didn't answer that either. I watched something shift in her face. 6 years of watching her play the victim in every room, and for the first time, I actually believed she might be one. Not entirely. She'd enjoyed the comments she made about me, the little performances at dinner tables, the way she'd smiled every time Cassian took her side over mine. She wasn't innocent. But she also hadn't built this. She'd been handed a role and told it was family loyalty. "How long," I asked him, "has this been going on? 2 years?" 2 years, I repeated. "So when you told me I was imagining things, I was protecting the firm. You were protecting yourself and using your sister as the wall between you and anyone who came looking." He finally looked at me directly, and for a moment I saw something close to desperation. "Eloin, if this comes out the way it looks right now, I could lose my license. Maybe worse. I need you to understand that whatever you think you found, it's not as simple as—" "I know exactly what I found," I said. "I've had 3 weeks to understand it. You've had 30 seconds. Nadia cleared her throat gently. "I should mention the call requesting information about tonight's guest list specifically asked whether additional people could be seated without appearing on the reservation." I looked at her. Someone else was supposed to be here tonight. She nodded slowly. "Someone who isn't on your husband's guest list, but is on Fenwick's." Cassian's face went pale in a way I had never once seen in 6 years of marriage. For the first time since we'd walked into that office, he looked like a man who understood he wasn't in control of this conversation anymore, and neither was I, not completely, because somewhere at that restaurant, someone I hadn't accounted for was about to walk into a room that already had far too many secrets in it. The knock on Nadia's office door came exactly 4 minutes after she told us someone unlisted might be walking into that restaurant. Nadia answered it herself. A young hostess stood in the hallway looking uneasy. "There's a woman at the front asking for Mr. Vale," she said. "She says she's expected." "Name?" Nadia asked. The hostess glanced at a small card in her hand. "Renata Cole." I watched Cassian's face when the name landed. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition, followed immediately by something closer to panic, quickly folded away and hidden behind his usual composure. But I'd been married to him for 6 years. I knew what his real face looked like underneath the practiced one, and I'd just seen it. "Who is she?" I asked. "A colleague," he said too quickly. "From a case. A colleague you didn't put on the guest list but who somehow knew to come tonight and ask for you by name." He didn't answer. Seraphine looked between us, and for once, she wasn't performing anything. "Cassian, who is Renata Cole?" "She's not important right now." "You just went pale when you heard her name," I said. "That makes her very important right now." Nadia stepped back into the doorway. "Should I have her wait? Or would you like to speak with her directly?" I looked at Cassian. He wasn't looking at any of us. He was staring at the floor like a man doing rapid math, trying to calculate how much damage one more piece of information could do to a night that had already fallen apart in his hands. "Bring her in," I said. "Elowin." "You've had 30 seconds to explain Fenwick Partners and you couldn't do it," I said. "Let's see if you can explain this one." Nadia nodded to the hostess, who disappeared down the hallway. For a moment, none of us spoke. Seraphine sat frozen in her chair, and Cassian stood with his hands pressed flat against the edge of Nadia's desk like he needed something solid to hold on to. I realized watching him that I wasn't afraid anymore. I had spent 3 weeks afraid of what I might find. Now that I was standing inside it, there was nothing left to be afraid of. Only things left to know. If you've ever watched someone's carefully built world start collapsing one name at a time, you understand exactly why Elowin didn't flinch. This is the kind of moment that separates the women who stay quiet from the women who finally get their answers. And if that resonates with you, stay close. Because Renata Cole is about to explain exactly what kind of marriage Elowin has actually been living inside. Renata Cole walked into that office like she belonged there more than any of us did. She was maybe 40, dressed simply, carrying a leather folder under one arm like she'd done this exact thing, before walked into a room and changed the temperature of it just by arriving. She looked at Cassian first. "You didn't tell them." "Renata, this isn't the time. You said you would handle it before tonight." Her eyes moved to me, and something in her expression softened, just slightly. "You must be Elowin." "I am. I don't believe we've met." "We haven't, but I've heard about you for 2 years." She glanced at the folder under her arm, then back at Cassian. "I work compliance review for a firm that was contracted to audit Northbridge Advisory 8 months ago. I found the same pattern your wife apparently found on her own, except she found it faster and without a subpoena." The room went very still. "You're an investigator," I said. "Independent auditor. I was hired by one of the development companies that paid into Northbridge after they noticed inconsistencies in their own books. My job was to trace where the money actually went." She looked at Cassian. "It went to an entity you control, structured to look like it belonged to your sister." Seraphine made a small sound, somewhere between a laugh and a breath knocked out of her. "I told you," she said to no one and everyone. "I told you this whole time." Renata continued steady, like she'd rehearsed this moment because she probably had. "I reached out to the restaurant this week because I needed to confirm attendance before I finalized my report. I wasn't trying to disrupt anyone's birthday. I was trying to make sure the right people were in the room when the truth came out instead of finding out about it secondhand." I looked at my husband. 2 years of small, dismissive sighs. 2 years of "that's just Seraphine." 2 years of being told I was imagining things, while an outside auditor had been building a case that would have exposed him with or without me. "You knew someone was already investigating you," I said slowly. "And you still let me believe I was losing my mind for asking questions." He didn't answer. He didn't have anything left to say that wouldn't make it worse. Renata opened her folder and set it gently on Nadia's desk, angled toward me instead of him. "I think," she said, "you're going to want to see this before he has a chance to explain it away." I opened the folder, and the first page inside it was a photograph of a document I'd already seen once before, except this version had a second signature at the bottom. Cassian's. Not Seraphine's. His. "That's the original consulting agreement," Renata said. "Before it was amended, your husband signed it directly, under his own name, 6 weeks before the version naming Seraphine as the financial interest holder was filed." I looked up at him. "You changed it. After the fact." "I restructured it," he said, his voice tight. "That's not illegal." "Restructuring it to remove your name and put your sister's on it, after an audit already flagged the account, sounds like something you'd call a client's action suspicious if you saw it in someone else's file." He didn't answer that. He'd stopped trying to explain, which somehow felt worse than the excuses had. Renata turned another page. "There's more. A second entity, opened 4 months ago. Harrow Consulting. Also connected to Fenwick. Also funded through payments that trace back to development contracts your husband represented." "Another one," Seraphine said quietly. "There's another one, and it's not even under my name this time." "No," Renata said. "This one's under yours, Mrs. Vale." The room went silent in a way that felt different from every silence before it. I stared at the page in front of me. My name, on a document I had never signed, never seen, never once been told existed. "That's forged," I said. "I believe it is," Renata said carefully. "The signature doesn't match the sample I was given for comparison, but it exists and it's filed, and if this ever reaches a formal investigation, your name is already inside it." I turned to Cassian. Whatever composure he'd been holding on to finally cracked. "I was going to remove it," he said, "before anyone ever looked." "Remove it," I repeated. "You put my name on a fraudulent filing, and your plan was to quietly take it back off before I noticed you'd used me the same way you used your sister." He didn't deny it. Seraphine stood up so fast her chair scraped hard against the floor. "You used both of us," she said. "This whole time you let me think family loyalty meant absorbing whatever mess you made, and you were ready to do the exact same thing to your own wife the second it was convenient." "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like," she snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, you built 2 years of protection around yourself using the 2 women who trusted you most, and neither of us knew we were the ones holding the risk." I watched her, and for the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel resentment toward her. I felt something closer to recognition. We had both been used by the same man and in different ways for different reasons, and both made to believe the other was the enemy. "He needed us fighting each other," I said slowly, mostly to myself. "As long as I thought you were the problem, I was never going to look closely enough at him." Seraphine's eyes met mine, and for the first time there was no performance in them at all, just exhaustion. Renata closed the folder gently. "There's a formal report being filed with the State Bar Association Monday morning. I came tonight because I thought you both deserved to hear it from someone before it becomes public record." Cassian's voice was barely above a whisper. "Monday." "Monday," Renata confirmed. "You have 2 days." I looked at my husband, at the man I had defended in my own mind 100 times over the last 3 weeks, telling myself there had to be an explanation that made this survivable, and I understood there wasn't one left to find. "2 days," I said, "to decide what kind of husband you're going to be when this comes out. Because I've already decided what kind of wife I'm not going to be anymore." We didn't go back to the dinner. I told Nadia to have someone quietly explain to the remaining guests that Cassian wasn't feeling well, and the party was ending early. No scene, no dramatic exit, just a closed door and 14 people left to wonder why the birthday boy never came back to blow out his candles. Renata left first, telling me she'd email a copy of everything in that folder before the weekend was over, so I wouldn't have to rely on memory or trust for what I'd just seen. I thanked her. I meant it more than she probably realized. Seraphine and I rode down in the elevator together, neither of us speaking until the doors opened onto the parking garage. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "Not for tonight. For every dinner before it, where I made you look unstable so nobody would ask questions about me. I didn't know I was covering for him, but I knew I was making things harder for you, and I did it anyway because it was easier than being the one people looked at twice." I studied her for a moment. 6 years of resentment don't dissolve in a parking garage in under a minute. But something in her voice sounded like the first honest thing she'd ever said to me. You have 2 days too, I told her. Same as him. Decide what you're going to tell people when this comes out, and whether you're going to keep protecting him or start protecting yourself. She nodded slowly, and we didn't say anything else. Cassian was waiting by the car when I came out. He looked smaller somehow, standing there under the garage lighting, like the version of him that commanded every room he walked into had been left behind on Nadia's desk. Eloin, I need you to understand. I understand everything, I said. That's the problem. For 6 years I let you convince me I didn't understand my own marriage. Tonight I understood it perfectly, in about 40 minutes without your help. What happens now? I looked at him for a long moment before I answered. Now I go home. Alone. And you figure out how to explain to a bar association what I already figured out on my own. 2 days felt shorter than I expected once I was the one living inside them. I spent Saturday morning at my kitchen island with Renata's email open on my laptop, reading through everything a second time, this time without shaking hands. The forged signature on Harrow Consulting. The original Fenwick agreement with Cassian's name still visible beneath the amendment. Every transfer, every date, every quiet decision he'd made, believing no one would ever line them all up. Cassian tried calling twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. He tried the apartment door once, standing outside for almost 10 minutes before I heard his footsteps finally retreat down the hallway. I watched through the peephole and didn't open it. Not out of anger anymore, out of clarity. There was nothing he could say through a door that would change what was already sitting in my inbox. Seraphine texted Sunday evening. A single message. I gave my attorney everything I have. I'm not covering for him anymore. I stared at that message for a long time before I replied. Thank you for telling the truth, even this late. She didn't respond, and I didn't need her to. Monday morning, I sat at that same kitchen island with a cup of coffee going cold in front of me, and I watched the clock the way I imagine people watch clocks before verdicts. At 9:14, Renata sent a short message confirming the report had been filed with the state bar. At 9:41, a second email arrived, this one from a name I didn't recognize, subject line blank. I almost didn't open it. Inside was a single line. You should also know he opened a third account 2 weeks ago. This one has your name on it too, and unlike the others, this one hasn't been touched yet. I sat back slowly, my coffee forgotten, and understood that whatever I thought I had already survived, the truth wasn't finished with me yet. A third account with my name on it, untouched, waiting, ready to be blamed on me the moment he needed a place to hide. I didn't call Cassian. I called a lawyer of my own that same morning, someone with no connection to his firm, no reason to protect him. By noon, I had my own filing in place, a formal statement establishing that any account bearing my name after that date had been opened without my knowledge or consent. I wasn't going to spend the next year explaining myself to a bar association investigation because I'd once trusted a man who never once considered what his choices might cost me. The bar association's review moved faster than I expected. Within 3 weeks, Cassian's license was suspended pending a full inquiry. The firm quietly removed his name from their letterhead before the story ever reached a headline. Seraphine's full cooperation, once she finally gave it, kept her from facing charges of her own. Though I don't think she'll ever fully forgive herself for the years she spent being useful to him instead of honest with herself. I filed for divorce the same week his suspension became official. People ask me sometimes if I regret staying quiet those 3 weeks before the dinner, gathering proof instead of confronting him the moment I found the first inconsistency. I don't. If I'd shouted across that kitchen island the day I found the Halston contract, he would have had time to erase every trace of what he'd built. Instead, I waited until the truth could stand on its own, strong enough that no one could call me the jealous wife imagining things. I didn't lose that marriage. I found out finally what it actually was. If this story reminded you of a moment in your own life when you finally stopped doubting what you already knew, you're exactly who this channel was made for. I tell these stories because so many women live through quiet moments just like this one and deserve to see themselves reflected in a woman who chooses truth over comfort. If that's you, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.